This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Trump in India. Namaste, Trump. The participants are Prafulla Ketkar, political analyst, and Nilab Srivastav, journalist.
US President Donald Trump has today reached India. This is his maiden trip to India after he took over as the President of the United States of America. This is also a standalone trip of US President to India. If I roll up the entire thing that happened since morning, shortly before 11:40, the President of the United States, along with his wife and his daughter, his son-in-law and other senior officials of his administration, they landed at Ahmedabad airport today. That is where from the two-day trip is going to begin. Shortly before 11:40 in Ahmedabad. From Ahmedabad airport, where the Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi himself received the President. Then they moved on from there to the Sabarmati Ashram. From Sabarmati Ashram, they had a road show, after which they reached the Motera Stadium, where this Namaste Trump event was held. This was on similar lines what we saw in Houston last year, where Prime Minister Modi had a similar engagement. So, Ketkar Sahab, both the leaders talked at that forum in Motera Stadium. Good amount of public present. While the US President talked about the partnership that both the countries have, he also talked about a lot of friendship that is going fast between India and US vis-a-vis defense and strategic ties. Prime Minister also called it a very historic event where the President has come to India and he has dedicated his 2 days. So both the speeches lauding the efforts of both the countries, the strategic and the deepening ties that both the countries have.
I see this almost 36 to 38 hours visit of US President to India is unique one for multiple reasons. But what is changing now? One is the global political scenario. The entire strategic situation internationally is changing. Secondly, the way India and US has developed the depth in strategic partnership, not just only in military terms but also in economic, cultural and the larger narrative of democracies. Third, the way Prime Minister Modi and President Trump has developed a different kind of chemistry, deeply rooted in a very pragmatic kind of diplomacy. If you analyze their speeches today, there were very subtle but important messages in those speeches. Prime Minister, of course, talked about unity that India represents in diversity, but at the same time, the way he compared Statue of Liberty and Statue of Unity, I think that message was not just there for India and America. It was a global message. So, in that sense, we are on the cusp of entering into a new era where this bond of trust is very much there. Earlier, our relationship was hyphenated by the element called Pakistan. But that factor is no longer a driving force in our relationship. That may be a side issue. And we are dealing with it independently. But the way we are engaging with each other, there is no hyphenation in it. We have a direct relationship with direct talk. If both the leaders are talking about business, US President mentioning this twice that your Prime Minister is a tough negotiator. That shows the kind of confidence and chemistry they have developed with each other. Therefore, I feel that, as two largest democracies, one oldest, one biggest, I think there was a larger message for the entire world and not just for the bilateral relationship. In that sense, I think this visit is very critical.
Also, if we talk about the business on table, from tomorrow on, the serious business talks now emerge. US President has said that they are looking at very strategic and deep ties. He also talked about that while we may go for a full-fledged trade deal in the later part of this year, but the strategic talk was about also signing a $3 billion deal vis-a-vis the defense sector. Also some 5-sector MOUs that are going to be signed between the two sides. So how do you see this strategic deepening, as you already mentioned very briefly in your first part, that the strategic deepening of ties, we purchasing a lot of military equipment from the US, the recent Air Force acquisitions or it is the defense acquisitions that we talk about, and this forging going ahead is taking it to a different level altogether?
See, when the Trump visit was announced, there was a lot of talk or rather hype about the trade deal. But frankly speaking, that trade deal has to move in positive direction. It will take some time because both these leaders are working in a different setup where both of them are concerned about their domestic economy and consolidating the foundation they have laid for their own countries. But when it comes to the defense sector, the way technology as well as the operational aspects of it, they are the key determinants now in defense sector. And I was hoping to get some signs of this tomorrow morning, but the way President Trump almost declared that $3 billion deal, mainly related to the helicopters, and I believe they are related to our defense modernization.
Yeah, if I can just elaborate on that, is 24 MH-60 Romeo helicopters and another set of the Apache helicopters, the attack helicopters that India
and even the naval cooperation is involved in it. As Prime Minister Modi himself elaborated that besides this, just purchasing equipments, the kind of training, the kind of engagements, the kind of joint exercises that are taking place of armed forces between India and US, and the way President Trump talked about every country having sovereign right to secure borders and preparing for that is the right of India. I think that messaging, the way US is seeing India's defense acquisition and modernization program, that shows the trust in this partnership. And there I believe that we have moved forward. That element of counterbalancing distrust, that somewhere is gone to the background, and we are openly talking about each other's interests. And I believe that perhaps after Howdy Modi event, President Trump reiterating that we are joint partners as far as fight against terrorism is concerned, and explicitly pointing out this as a threat to democracy and global peace. From diplomatic point of view, I think it carries a very important message.
If we can elaborate on this, the President of the United States did mention about that India and US, if I can quote him, India and US are committed to fight terrorists and their ideology, and that is why my government is working with Pakistan to crack down on terror groups. So terrorism, when it comes to talks with the world's superpower, the United States and India, which has faced the brunt of terrorism for so long. Mr. Ketkar, do you think this is one step forward, taking the strategic defense partnership vis-a-vis counter-terrorism measures, also in the perspective of what India is going through at its borders, especially since last year when we have abrogated Article 370 from the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and we are ensuring that the borders remain peaceful and the Kashmir Valley itself remains very peaceful in these times?
It certainly does. The way that political correctness about talking about terrorism is somewhere gone after the Houston rally, and I think it culminated today in Ahmedabad, and I'm sure by tomorrow because what President Trump said, and again I'm quoting ahead what you have quoted, the United States and India are firmly united in our ironclad resolve to defend our citizens from the threat of radical Islamic terrorism. Both of our countries have been hurt by the pain and turmoil of terrorism and that terrorism brings. So, on the one hand, when there is this optics of what is generally called as hug diplomacy and cultural extravaganza, there is a straight talk about business interests, strategic interests, threats to global peace and bilateral relationship, and he is talking about protecting citizens. Each and every citizen is important, and that has been US approach for a long time. Somewhere now US is seeing India adopting the same kind of approach and recognizing that, the way we showed that in Syria or other West Asian countries, or for that matter even recently when coronavirus thing happened in China, and the way we rescued our own citizens. For India, every citizen matters. That has been a concern for US. I think that message, it is not just about borders. Each and every citizen is important for us. And when we talk about security, we are not just talking about border security. That traditional understanding of security is gone. It is going beyond military. So, intelligence sharing, counterterrorism cooperation, managing non-state actors very effectively through trustworthy inputs, all these things matter, and cracking down on this nexus or network of maybe drug trafficking, terrorism, small arms, this nexus somewhere is deep-rooted and we need to address that. Somewhere that messaging is clearly there when President Trump boldly articulated his views on this issue.
The Prime Minister also, both the times, before the US President and after the US President, he spoke, and he also underlined the kind of importance India gives to a very strong partnership with the US when he says, the Prime Minister, and I quote him, that India and the US relations and the cooperation will play a very important role in deciding the course of the world in the 21st century. And I'm of the categorical view, the Prime Minister says this, that India and the US are natural partners. So when we are talking about natural partners, as to what you said, that this is taking beyond the optics of cultural extravaganza or probably a visit along with what the serious business is. So what tomorrow is expected at the Hyderabad House, at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, when both the leaders will have one-to-one serious talk between them, when they will get time to do all this. So these all aspects will also be talked about.
Whenever we talk about the concept called shared values, we many a times just limit ourselves to the broader concepts of democracies. But what is peculiar about India and the US is they have been the land of opportunities for a long time. Of course, US explored opportunities more in terms of technological and material terms. But India has been attraction for many people across the world for exploring something at the spiritual level. And what President Trump rightly underscored today, and I was really surprised the way, without any support in his speech, the way he spoke about, say, Swami Vivekananda or Mahatma Gandhi or Sachin Tendulkar. So that clearly shows that what kind of understanding he has developed. He didn't just mention Diwali, he also mentioned about Holi. All these things, I think, shows the kind of in-depth understanding that US is developing about India. The traditional understanding of India is just arriving, coming, or still backward, or still looking for coming on the global stage. That, I think, has completely shifted. And of course, as Prime Minister Modi rightly said, those 40 lakh Indians who are residing in the US, they have played a critical role. And Howdy Modi rally was reflection of that. But the larger reflection of that in terms of cultural diversity that celebrates inherent unity, that was there somewhere at Monterrey today when President experienced the kind of, throughout the passage, the way he experienced those cultural presentations and the full packed stadium at Ahmedabad. It is certainly a different kind of diplomacy that we are seeing these days.
Taking forward from what you said, is also the kind of similarities that both the leaders also talked about at the Motera Stadium. So while President Trump says that we are going to be a loyal friend of India, Prime Minister Modi also acknowledged that we are also according a lot of importance to the ties with US, whether it is cultural, strategic, defense, counterterrorism, everywhere. And the US President also mentioned that as you are combating poverty, as you are combating the space where public facilities have to be increased, poverty has to be reduced, these are the challenges that your Prime Minister is facing, and at the same time US is steadfast behind you to help you in these matters. So both the leaders also trying to complement as to what they say, and looks like that they are on the same page on so many issues that both the countries are facing as challenges.
See, the way world economy is growing, now the development cannot be seen just in terms of GDP and the volume of your economy. How much it is percolating down, how much it is actually benefiting the larger social sectors. That is very important thing. And that's where, I thought President Trump mentioning about whether cleanliness, whether toilets, whether poverty eradication. These are the things where two giant economies has to think about when they are talking about partnership. It is not just strategic, it is not just about business, but at the level of people, we are talking about security in the larger context, where not just security from the threats like terrorism, but also human security aspect we are partnering with. That is ultimately going to be the underline to define this relation.
So while the first day has emerged out to be a lot of activity-wise very engaging, we hope that the day 2, which is the second day of the official engagements now for President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, will result into a fruitful dialogue, and strategic partnership goes beyond as to what it has stood between India and US for all these years. It goes beyond this and deepens. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Trump in India, Namaste Trump. The participants were Prafulla Ketkar, political analyst, and Nilab Srivastav, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on the website newsonair.com. You can also follow us on the News on AIR app for updates. You may email opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.